When asked to pinpoint the absolute highlight of her existence, Trisha didn't hesitate for a second. I'd have to say, Garth, truly, she confessed, but that sentiment lands differently today. The country icon behind legendary tracks like Friends in Low Places is currently weathering a storm of serious sexual assault and battery allegations. Yet Trisha focuses on the bond, saying it is beautiful to share a life with someone who is genuinely your best friend first. Someone who isn't afraid to give you the unvarnished truth and say, look, this is my honest take as your friend. However, what Trisha Yearwood recently unveiled after turning 60 has left her fan base completely stunned and, frankly, absolutely heartbroken. Beyond the glitz of the Grammy Awards, the best-selling culinary empire and her legendary status in Nashville lies a narrative far darker than anyone anticipated, from devastating family tragedies to raw, tear-filled confessions regarding her marriage to Garth Brooks. The truths she just exposed might permanently alter your perception of the country queen. The grief that shattered her world. While the public knows Trisha for her powerhouse vocals, diamond-certified records, and a kitchen that smells of southern comfort underneath the sequined gowns, was a woman quietly collapsing under an unbearable weight of sorrow. Reaching the age of 60 is usually a massive celebration, a diamond jubilee of life. But for Trisha, blowing out those candles was a stinging reminder of the empty chairs at the table, the beloved faces that never made it to see this milestone. When she finally pulled back the curtain on this pitch-black chapter of her journey, the public was floored. It wasn't just her emotional vulnerability that shocked them. It was the realisation of just how heavy a burden she had been hauling in silence. Her parents weren't merely authority figures or guardians in her life. They were her absolute bedrock, her North Star. Trisha has always spoken of them with a deep, reverent respect that suggested a connection far more profound than the typical parent-child dynamic. For most people, vacations are a chance to escape their family drama, but for Trisha, a vacation wasn't a vacation unless they were there. While most young adults dream of fleeing the nest to find independence, Trisha and her sister were running back home. They were best friends long before they were family members, so losing them felt like watching her entire concept of home burn to the ground. The tragedy struck in two devastating waves. First, her father passed away right as her culinary career was skyrocketing. Suddenly, amidst the applause and book signings, she found herself standing in a high-end kitchen where every single ingredient and aroma triggered a memory of him. It felt as though sorrow was being whisked into every batter and stew. Her mother followed him just 3 years later, and with her death, Trisha lost not just a mother's love, but the keeper of their shared heritage. It wasn't merely a death in the family. It felt like the extinction of her personal culture. The comforting chatter in the living room, the shared laughter over Sunday biscuits and gravy, it all went dead silent. The world saw the bubbly TV host and the radiant performer lighting up the stage. They never saw the woman sobbing over old handwritten recipe cards in the dim light, or the hollow feeling of walking into a massive empty estate that used to be the heartbeat of her existence. Trisha never sought anyone's pity. Instead, she quietly allowed that grief to sculpt her art. Every meal prepared on camera, every ballad sung in the studio began to carry a double meaning. To entertain the masses, yes, but also to honour the dead. She never explicitly stated it, but her most devoted followers started to realise this was a woman cooking alongside ghosts. What made the ordeal even more haunting was the sheer abruptness of the void. There was no long goodbye tour, no time to mentally prepare for the end. Trisha was simply left standing in the wreckage. One day her parents were there, anchoring her world. The next day she was adrift. The cameras captured a polished superstar with flawless makeup and charming sound bites. They missed the mornings where the grief was so heavy she couldn't leave her bed, or how a random song on the radio could shatter her composure for the entire day. In this darkness, her sister Beth became her only lifeline. They were navigating the same storm, feeling the exact same reverberations of loss in their chests. Beth wasn't just a sibling in name, she was the only other human being on Earth who understood the specific frequency of Trisha's pain. Together, they clung to one another like shipwreck survivors in a hurricane. "You are my person," Trisha once admitted in a candid interview. Her voice trembling with emotion. That wasn't just a sweet sentiment, it was a survival tactic. The two of them, the last of their line, bore a legacy that was far too valuable to let disappear into the ether. Yet, a secret fans never knew was that during this season of mourning, Trisha nearly walked away from the spotlight entirely. The allure of the stage had vanished. The music industry seemed too noisy, too superficial, too demanding. There were nights she stared at her acoustic guitar and felt absolutely nothing, just numbness. The same powerhouse who once fantasized about selling out arenas now only craved total silence, isolation, and perhaps most shockingly, a final goodbye to her career. So what exactly pulled her back from the brink? What reignited the spark in a soul that felt completely hollowed out by loss? Just as Trisha was teetering on the edge of retiring into obscurity forever, an unexpected influence would shift the trajectory of her narrative. And surprisingly, the voice that saved her wasn't her own. It was when Garth became her anchor. As Trisha stood on the precipice of abandoning her life's work, the world remained blissfully ignorant. She was a celebrated Grammy winner, a literary success, a household name across America. How could anyone suspect she felt like a ghost in her own life? The audience saw a woman who'd conquered the world, but behind closed doors, she was quietly coming undone until the man who had been by her side through it all, her husband Garth Brooks, did something that would drag her back from the ledge. It is easy to forget that long before they were the power couple, Trisha and Garth, they were just two scrappy young artists trying to survive the Nashville grind. But what Garth did for her during this dark chapter wasn't about show business strategy. It was an act of pure, unadulterated love. He didn't attempt to fix her grief. He didn't offer platitudes about being strong or moving on. Instead, he simply carved out a safe sanctuary for her to fall apart and, more importantly, gave her the space to breathe. Learning to simply inhale and exhale again became her only true rescue. To the masses, G was a veritable titan of country music, a figure larger than life itself. He commanded sold-out stadium tours with an effortless, magnetic charisma that drew millions in. Yet when the lights dimmed and the crowds dispersed, he transformed into something far more profound, a calm harbour in the storm. He became her absolute grounding force, a tangible promise that the spinning world could be paused if she required it. True to his character, he didn't offer empty platitudes about being present. He demonstrated his devotion through action, orchestrating elaborate surprises like secret recording sessions with her sister. He showered her with birthday gifts that were less about monetary value and more about soul-deep connection. He was constantly reminding Trisha that beauty still flourished in a world that felt grey. One specific offering was the Mustang, a nostalgic nod to her teenage years, and a physical manifestation of the identity she believed had evaporated. It represented the wild, unbridled spirit of a girl who once chased horizons without a shred of trepidation. G hunted down a rare anniversary model, one of fewer than 2,000 ever manufactured. He presented this token to her on her 50th birthday. It was never about the luxury of the vehicle. It was an exercise in remembrance. The gesture was designed to prove that the past didn't have to be a source of pain. It demonstrated that her history could be revived and enjoyed, even if only on 4 wheels. However, the most heart-wrenching moment arrived when Trisha sat down to review the final mix of her latest record, only to hear a sound she never anticipated. It was the unmistakable sound of her sister's voice harmonising perfectly on the track. Trisha knew for a fact her sister hadn't been anywhere near the studio. She hadn't even been in the same city. G had clandestinely flown her in to lay down the vocals, then whisked her back home in complete secrecy. The moment the sound hit Trisha's ears, she crumbled, dissolved in tears. This wasn't merely a musical harmony, it was the sonic feeling of home. These were not grand, performative stunts for the press. They were intimate, calculated decisions made by a husband who recognised his wife was unmoored and desperately needed an anchor to hold on to. G did far more than simply support her career. He methodically returned the missing fragments of her soul, and slowly Trisha began the long journey back. She returned to the woman she once was, only forged stronger in the fire. Yet even a romance that runs as profoundly deep as theirs is not immune to private battles, as Trisha has confessed. Being bound in matrimony to a man so universally magnetic a figure adored by millions can often feel like she is forced to share her husband with the entire planet. There were dark moments of creeping doubt, times she questioned if there was enough oxygen left in the room for her own star to twinkle beside his supernova. Yet G never once tried to dim her shine. He willingly stepped back to hand her the spotlight. However, as her professional landscape shifted and her grief refused to lift, a singular quiet question began to scream in her mind. Trisha began to wonder, had she already experienced the golden era of her life, or was there something even more shocking and unexpected? Waiting silently in the wings to reveal itself, the narrative involves fame, comfort food, and the spectres haunting her kitchen. For the average observer, Trisha Yearwood's pivot from a chart-topping country icon to the queen of daytime cooking shows appeared to be a seamless, calculated brand evolution. But the public remained blind to the reality of the show. Trisha's Southern Kitchen was never designed to be just another television gig or paycheck. At its very core, it was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. It was a desperate, clawing attempt to maintain a connection to something sacred, her parents. In every recipe she broadcast, in every single spoonful. She tasted on camera a memory was unlocked, and occasionally she tasted ghosts. When Trisha's parents departed this life, it was far more than a standard personal loss. It felt as though the structural integrity of her home had vanished. The safety of her mother's laughter bouncing off the kitchen tiles. The enveloping warmth of her father's anecdotes while dinner bubbled on the stove, it was all suddenly erased. Grief took up residence in the corners of her estate. Settling thick and heavy like undisturbed dust, the silence was absolute and deafening. So she resorted to the only activity that offered logic in a senseless world. She began to cook. She transmuted that paralysing grief into something capable of nourishing others. Every dish prepared was a memory resurrected from the grave. Her mother's potato salad was far more than a list of ingredients. It was a holy ritual. The aroma, the mouthfeel, even the specific angle the bowl occupied on the counter. It conjured her mother's spirit for a fleeting second. Her programme was never about flaunting culinary expertise. It was a quiet, televised rebellion. It was a battle against the erosion of memory, a soft war waged against the passage of time. Her audience, largely unaware, was being invited into a hallowed sanctuary. They weren't merely watching a celebrity chop vegetables, they were witnessing a woman stitch herself back together. Yet the cruel irony was not lost on Trisha. The very medium that allowed her to process her devastation food was simultaneously the adversary she had warred with for the majority of her existence. Her weight, her body image, and the crushing pressure of being a female celebrity in a culture fixated on physical perfection haunted her every move. While the world lavished praise on her biscuits, she privately agonised over the caloric cost of every bite. The kitchen, usually a haven of comfort, could just as easily transform into a psychological battlefield. In press junkets, Trisha has frequently used humour to deflect from her history of yo-yo dieting. But beneath the self-deprecating jokes lay a woman wrestling with the terror of presenting her authentic body on high-definition television, not as a size 2 mannequin, and not as an industry ideal, but simply as Trisha. A woman who is strong, complex, and authentically real. That internal civil war was just as ferocious as any chart-topping rivalry she had ever encountered during her years in the music industry, and yet she refused to retreat. She made the conscious choice to be visible, flaws, cravings, stretch marks and all. She spoke candidly about her love affair with food and her desire to feel at peace within her own skin. She demonstrated to women everywhere that it was acceptable to exist in the messy middle ground, to not have every aspect of life curated and solved, to enjoy a slice of pecan pie and still possess self-worth. That specific brand of quiet confidence resonates and lingers with the public far longer than any airbrushed magazine cover ever could. Still, the journey was never effortless. Every new season of filming required her to face the lens, the critics, and her own internalised standards of perfection. But every plate she served transformed into a silent, enduring tribute to her family line. It was a mixture of love, profound grief, and resilience whipped into batter and brushed with hope. For the countless souls tuning in who were navigating the murky waters of grief or isolation, this programme transcended the boundaries of a typical culinary instructional. It morphed into a digital hearth radiating a comforting glow that made lonely living rooms feel a little less empty. However, as the ratings climbed and her reputation as the nation's beloved Southern matriarch became set in stone, a singular nagging inquiry started to bubble up amidst the success. It was brewing dangerously close to the boiling point. Was she truly prepared to unveil the ingredients of a much more personal creation, one that had been marinating in the depths of her soul? This was a revelation capable of altering the entire trajectory of her career. It brings us to the ballad she nearly left on the cutting room floor. You see, Trisha Yearwood has never been a stranger to the gravitational pull of a powerful melody. When she steps up to the microphone, every syllable she utters feels like it has been baptised in absolute honesty with each performance, vibrating with an unpolished, visceral intensity that fans can feel in their bones. Yet there exists a specific composition that almost shattered her resolve completely. The challenge wasn't in hitting the high notes or mastering the rhythm, but rather that the narrative hit with a devastating precision right at her front door. The track, titled I Remember You, was far more than filler for a record. It served as the final farewell she was denied the chance to whisper a sorrowful correspondence addressed to a time that had slipped away. It was an envelope sealed not with wax but with weeping. Upon her initial reading of the verses, Trisha was paralysed. The words painted a vivid portrait of yearning, echoing with the silence of voices that had long since faded into the ether. They described the phantom sensation of holding hands that were no longer there. The imagery struck a nerve, conjuring agonising memories of her late mother and the stark, haunting vacancy of her seat during family meals. It brought to mind that precious voicemail recording she simply couldn't bear to erase from her phone. Attempting to lay down the vocals in the recording booth summoned a tidal wave of flashbacks. Suddenly, she was back in the sterile white of the hospital room, reliving the frantic midnight calls and the deafening quiet of the car ride afterwards. Tears flowed freely, followed by fresh waves of sorrow. For a fleeting second, she seriously considered abandoning the project entirely. However, for an artist like Trisha, this industry has never been merely a paycheck. It serves as her private journal, her sanctuary for secrets, and her most reliable form of psychological healing. Therefore, rather than retreating from the hurt, she embraced it fully. Then, in a move that took even her by surprise, she made a request, inviting her sibling to provide the backing harmonies. Her sister, the sole individual on Earth who understood the precise depth of that void, was quietly jetted in thanks to a covert operation orchestrated by her husband, Garth Brooks, intended as a poignant birthday gift. When playback began and Trisha distinguished the sound of her sister's vocals woven seamlessly behind her own, she completely broke down. That instance transcended the technical goal of cutting a hit record. It was an act of emotional preservation. It was a declaration affirming their survival amidst the loss. For the country star, this ceased to be a mere melody and transformed into a resurrection. Her mother's spirit was alive within every single musical note and every intake of breath. Hearing her sister's timbre shadowing hers transported them back in time as if they were two small children once more. Harmonising in the family kitchen while their parents swayed to the crackle of the radio, the public debut of I Remember You solidified itself as one of the most profound milestones in her decades-long journey. Its value wasn't measured in Billboard rankings or sales figures, but in the gift it bestowed upon her, a medium to communicate directly with the woman who raised her. The audience remained largely oblivious to the sheer fortitude required to deliver that ballad live on stage. With every rendition, she would inevitably catch sight of a fan in the front row, dabbing at their eyes, serving as a stark reminder that heartbreak is the one language we all speak fluently. She realised she was not isolated in her suffering. Away from the glare of the spotlight, Trisha would occasionally crumble once the curtains fell. There were certainly evenings where she found herself unable to reach the final chorus without her voice catching in her throat. Nevertheless, she persisted in keeping the track on the set list, driven not by contractual duty, but by a deep sense of reverence. Her mother had raised her on the principle of unvarnished honesty, and this composition represented Trisha's absolute truth. The heavy emotional tax it exacted was immense, yet it simultaneously facilitated a form of healing. Vocalising her grief didn't erase the agony, but it succeeded in giving that anguish a definitive purpose. And perhaps in the quiet spaces between the lyrics, it offered solace to others navigating bereavement, making them feel slightly less solitary. This had always been Trisha's true superpower. It wasn't merely the quality of her vocals, but her innate capacity to evoke genuine emotion in strangers. However, just as she started to regain her equilibrium, murmurs began to circulate through the corridors of Nashville. Speculation ran rampant that Trisha was orchestrating plans to permanently walk away from the music business entirely. Was it conceivable that she could abandon the platform that defined her? Or was there an unseen force, something far more significant, pulling her toward an unexpected horizon? The gossip columns buzzed with talk of retirement and a golden voice falling silent. As the final curtain dropped on yet another Capacity crowd tour, the atmosphere felt undeniably altered. The die-hard fans sensed the shift, and even her musicians exchanged concerned glances in the wings. Trisha Yearwood, the woman who famously ignited arenas with her effortless charisma, appeared more reserved, lost in deep contemplation. Each encore performance carried the heavy weight of a final goodbye. Was it within the realm of possibility that the very instrument which had shepherded country music through 30 years of evolution was preparing to mute itself forever? The swirling rumours were not without merit. During recent press junkets, Trisha had begun dropping heavy concepts like legacy and introspection. She frequently lamented how time was slipping away much too rapidly, expressing a preference for tranquil mornings over the chaotic schedule of a touring artist and of listening rather than singing. While she stopped short of explicitly stating she was handing in her resignation, there was a palpable pivot in the discourse regarding her future. It sounded as though she were gently closing the book on a long chapter rather than eagerly turning the page to start a new one. Insiders close to the star confided that she had become fiercely guarded regarding her personal schedule. In the wake of burying both her mother and father, the glare of the spotlight didn't offer the same warmth it once did. The addiction to the applause didn't pull at her like it had in her youth. Instead, she discovered a profound solace in the rhythms of her home kitchen, caring for her beloved rescue dogs and dedicating quality uninterrupted hours to her husband, Garth. For the first time in 30 years, she was actually visualising an existence void of blinding stage rigs. Yet making a clean break is never a simple affair when your very soul is stitched into the tapestry of the ballads you perform. The fan base was certainly not prepared to release her, and deep in her core, Trisha harboured doubts about her own readiness to depart. Her heart still experienced a pang of emotion whenever her hits graced the airwaves. The adrenaline of the live show hadn't abandoned her completely. It had merely quieted down, resembling a solitary candle flickering in a vast cavernous hall. She honestly didn't know if she should cup her hands to protect that flame or douse it with fuel to roar once more. And yet the entertainment machine is notoriously ruthless. Any indication of hesitation is, to the vultures in the industry, silence is often mistaken for weakness. The gossip mill began to churn, whispering that she had lost her competitive edge, claiming she was now more interested in domestic aprons than sold-out arenas. They said her golden era was dead and buried. Those rumours bit hard, but Trisha had evolved past the desperate need for public approval. She was on a profound quest for genuine meaning. And if finding that purpose required booking fewer television appearances, sitting for fewer intrusive interviews, and spending more quality time within the sanctuary of her home with G and her sister, then she accepted that trade without hesitation. Yet behind the curtain, lucrative offers continued to pile up. Promoters were throwing money at her: a massive Las Vegas residency, a drama-filled reality series, and even a tell-all book deal. But Trisha turned the majority of them down cold. The simple truth was, she refused to let the world consume her image any longer. She fought to shield the holy parts of her life, the music, the nostalgia, and those fleeting, intimate instances that now held significantly more weight than any trophy she could place on a shelf. G, always her rock and biggest champion, stood unshakable by her side. "You have already proven everything you need to prove to this world," he whispered to her one evening as they watched the Tennessee sun dip below the horizon from their porch. "From here on out, it is about doing only what feeds your spirit." And perhaps, just perhaps, those quiet words were the key that unlocked something deep inside her. Maybe this wasn't about abandoning the stage. It was about reclaiming the agency to choose exactly when and how she occupied it. But just as the public was growing accustomed to this reclusive version of the country star, she delivered a shock to the system. A single appearance for one night only at a solitary venue. It was a performance stripped of glitz, so raw and emotionally charged that the audience sat in stunned silence, barely daring to breathe. What was the hidden message behind that solitary ballad? Was it a goodbye? As Trisha celebrated her 60th birthday, the harsh glare of the limelight might have softened, but she seems to prefer the dimming glow. She is done running on the hamster wheel for #1 hits or seeking validation at award shows. Instead, she is curating a life of substance, savouring a quiet morning coffee with G, perfecting a grandmother's recipe, or cruising down the highway in her dream Mustang. While the world stares at a country music icon, Trisha looks in the mirror and sees a woman who has weathered the storms of romance, grief and stardom, only to emerge resilient. Her retreat into silence over the past year wasn't an act of disappearing. It was a deliberate strategy to locate tranquility in an existence that previously demanded every second of her energy. And now, as rumours of a permanent retirement reach a fever pitch, she offers no comment, neither validating nor refuting the claims. She is simply existing, living one day, one memory and one melody at a time. Yet her devoted fan base remains restless, asking, has Trisha truly sung her final verse on the big stage? Or is there a grand finale still lurking in the shadows? If history has taught us one lesson about this powerhouse, it is to expect the unexpected. Trisha Yearwood's narrative is far more than a tale of celebrity peaks and heartbreak. It serves as a reflection for all of us navigating the realities of ageing, love and loss. At 60, she is breaking her silence not to sell tabloids, but to prioritise her mental peace. Whether she hangs up the microphone for good or shocks the world with a farewell tour, one truth remains undeniable. Her voice, woven through her music and her life, will never truly fade away. What is your take on this? Is this the beginning of her twilight years, or is this merely the deep breath before a thunderous encore? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you are captivated by the hidden struggles and untold stories of Nashville's royalty, remember to hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and click on the next video that is waiting right here for you.